I call the November 6th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting of Glencoe Park District to order. Lisa, please call the roll and note the time.
7 o'clock. Member Bourne? Member Kobe? Snyder?
Yes.
Hector?
He
He had to take a call. He's here. Left off our call. Chair Spain.
here.
Hey.
All right. So I believe that we have a candidate and a presenter here. Otherwise, no one, do you know whether?
Otherwise,
No.
staff.
Otherwise, staff. Yep. So I just want to, this isn't exactly on the agenda, but I just want to officially, for the record, congratulate all of the staff and the board members for all of the effort for the referendum. This has been a long process. Everybody's played a role in sharing information and getting input from the various board members to structuring the bond issue, determining what we could afford and determining the projects and communicating. They're really significant task that took dedication and a lot of follow-up, and Lisa for your leadership. So, and really, I think everybody participated in it. So I just want to say thank you and congratulations. And just that, I think local government's really important. There's a lot we can do in our own community with local government that kind of reflects the values of our community. And what we're doing here is in community feedback and what the community values and acting. So that's something that we can all feel good about today. So with that, I'm going to move on to the agenda item about the truth and taxation overview and discussion.
So I asked John to put this back on the agenda since Stephanie and Bart were not here last at the board meeting. So just a reminder, this is discussion for a hearing that will appear on the agenda for the November board meeting. So turn it over to John.
Yep. Correct. Thank you, Lisa. The Commissioner Schneider and Boran just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to review the memo, see if you had any questions. We're proposing a 3.4% increase this year, which is the maximum allowable under PTEL, less than the 5% that we've had in the 2 previous years. At the October board meeting, we approved just the truth in taxation hearing. So the actual truth in taxation hearing is scheduled for the upcoming November board meeting, at which point, obviously, public has the ability to comment, and then the board still has the ability to adjust the levy whichever way they would like at that truth in taxation or at the vote upon the vote for the property tax ordinance after the truth in taxation hearing. So I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to kind of go over it with you and understand what's been voted on thus far and what our options still are moving forward.
And also just the discussion last time, I think the 3 of us came to a consensus about levying to the CPI rate, but we just had a discussion about acknowledging that the community is sensitive to tax increases given the reassessment, previous tax increases being, at that 5% level, and our overlapping entities doing that as well, and going for the bond referendum. But I think that, we talked about it's a use it or lose it sort of situation where if you don't levy to what you can't recoup that. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the future about the budget, and capital expenses could be higher. We don't really know the direction of even now inflation over the next year. That we kind of came to the conclusion that it was reasonable and prudent to go forward with the maximum allowable levy, but just had a hearty discussion about how the community might feel about it. And then, so that was the vote to have the hearing.
Correct.
And then tonight, or next meeting.
Next meeting is the vote on the ordinance. And again, you
Ordinance.
have the ability to adjust that percentage whichever way you see fit. We can adjust it at that meeting if we chose to do so.
So given the sensitivity and the just, of just kind of how we think the community might feel about it, we just wanted to make sure that we brought it up with the two of you here to see if you had any questions.
Yeah, I don't, I don't have any questions, and it was consistent with the way it was done last year. Yeah, so I would, if I were here, I would vote for it. I would support it.
Did you guys discuss like what would be the difference in the amount we get if you lowered it like 0.5% or?
We don't have those figures offhand. I could definitely pull those together for the truth and taxation hearing. If we do tweak it a percentage or so, it all would be, an estimate, but we would be able to pull something together to see how it would impact like an average, $1 million house or whatever it might be. Could it be prepared?
Keep in mind that even if you bring it down 0.5%, over years, that 0.5% could add up to a lot because, it just keeps on.
But isn't it only for 1 year at a time?
Well, yeah, so the way it works is there's potential that you're going to lose permanently. It's going to be a compounding loss. And and that's why really the main tool, if you do want to provide some property tax relief in a given year, is really looking more towards a debt service abatement, which is what we did a few years back. Because as Carol had alluded to, it's if you don't capture it all in the year that there's new growth, or you have the ability to catch all of the 3.4% of the CPI. There's potential that you lose that in future years. There is legislation that allows you to try to recoup it within 3 years, but there's no guarantee on that. So it really is the compounding effect that you have to be concerned about if you do ratchet it down, the operating levy, at least, if you ratchet that down for a given year. So what you really want to look to is either the special rec levy or a debt service abatement if you're looking to provide property tax relief in a given year.
I think just eventually it is something to think about because now with home rule, even though that was kind of promised that wasn't going to accrue with taxes, but, it's just everything's going to continue to go up and maybe we'll reach a point where we're comfortable to adjust. I'm not saying it's this year, but just to think about it in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I would be a little hesitant right now because we don't know what the paid leave ordinance, if the financial implication of that, if we don't get relief on that one.
Yeah.
Which we are trying to do. So I would not recommend doing it this year, but if we do have some success in that area, something we can definitely look into.
I'm also going to be interested in the presentation that we have about the referendum, just in case when interest rates are higher, potential for that. So we have less financing capacity. And then, just in the event that we have cost overruns, but want to complete the process. And I believe we've been using our surplus revenues for our capital improvements. And I think we'll be drawing that balance down over the next few years as part of our capital improvement plan. So that's also something to keep in mind. But then, so I guess at this point, do we have consensus to move forward next meeting as presented with the CPI cap for the levy?
Yes.
Yeah, next meeting, that's the truth and taxation.
It's the hearing and then,
Right.
and then there will be action item to vote on it also, if the board is comfortable to do so.
I don't believe we publicized that in the past other than have it on our website. Is that still the current plan to just put it on our website, put it as the meeting and have it clear there? I'm fine with that, by the way,
Yep.
because that's what we've done historically. And I don't think we've had anyone come after the truth and taxation saying, hey, they were concerned they didn't know about it. So I think our plan historically worked. It shouldn't change for this one, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, we've had it on the website for 30 days in advance. So it is available on the website and it is going in the, yeah, we did kind of change the location too of it to make it a little
Okay.
more visible from our homepage, and it is going to be in the paper, I believe a week from tomorrow, or is it tomorrow? Yeah,
Tomorrow?
tomorrow, that's correct.
Yeah, so
yes.
we also
So-
publish in the paper.
Yeah.
And actually, we don't even have to do a truth and taxation hearing if it's below 5%.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it's below 5%, yeah.
5%. So as a standard rule, we always put it on the agenda for transparency. So we're
Yeah,
going
no,
above and
I'm
beyond.
fine with it. with us keeping it. I just want to make sure we're all
Yep.
aware of what that means. But I think it's good. I mean, I think we shouldn't, unless anyone here has heard negative feedback from the community, which I have not, it's not broken. Don't fix it.
All right, thank you.
Well, with
Appreciate
that,
that.
I think we'll move on to what we're all excited to talk about is the discussion of the referendum results and next steps.
I would like to also echo Carol's statement, but more towards the board. So I really like to thank the board for making the decision and thoughtful consideration to go for a referendum and then your advocacy. I know that you're out in the community, educating the community on what this meant. So that is very much appreciated. So we appreciate your time and your efforts. So throw it over to Kyle.
All right, thank you, President Spain. Thank you, Lisa. Did we get the handouts?
Oh,
So-
yeah.
So before we jump in, we're gonna have some handouts for the board here. There'll be the updated heat sheets, the proposed capital improvement plan timeline, and the proposed capital improvement plan budget. Before we jump in, just kind of wanted to, mention that going through the
Thank you.
comprehensive
Fun.
master plan process over the past year and a half, all the community input, board discussion, staff feedback, it really came through loud and clear that there is strong support for the concept of taking care of what we have. And really this 4-year plan, I think, is kind of rooted in that idea of just taking care of what we have. So before we get into the 4-year proposed capital improvement plan, I just want to recap our heat sheets. I believe all the board members are familiar with our heat sheets, how they're laid out, what they contain. It really is our major planning and tracking tool when it comes to our major amenities and assets and our capital spending. But just to review real quick, our heat sheets are really broken down by the amenity. This is the playground section. You have the full Fund 69 heat sheet in front of you. But we break it down by the amenity. We have the installation date of that amenity, the expected useful life of an amenity. And then on the further to the right 3 columns, we have as a amenity approaches its end of useful life, we assign it an estimated replacement cost and then an estimated replacement year. And then the estimated future replacement cost, which includes a 5% compounding annual growth rate attached to it. And so this is a living, breathing document. It's updated to reflect, current cost estimates and current slated timelines for projects. And so really this heat sheet is again our major tracking and planning tool, and is really the guiding light for this 4-year plan. So now we'll jump into the proposed 4-year capital improvement plan. This plan is really anchored by 4 major projects, 3 of which are the referendum projects, the Glencoe Beach, the maintenance center and the ball field here at Takeif, and the greenhouse. Just to note, we call it the Glencoe Beach project. It contains all those kind of subsets that are on the heat sheets that we'll get into a little bit later in terms of phasing. The 4 non-referendum projects are proposed to be Shelton Racket Courts, West Park, Friends Park, and Milton. Before we jump ahead, did want to kind of open it up quickly just for a board quick discussion about Milton. By no means are we looking for a decision necessarily tonight or putting anybody's feet to the fire, but we do just want to see if there is a general feeling, a consensus, one way or the other. And for the purposes of moving forward, if there is consensus to move forward, we'll keep it on this 4-year plan as is right now. If there's any need to schedule a follow-up meeting with a dedicated agenda item, we can absolutely do that as soon as December. So again, just wanted to pause kind of for a second on the 4-year plan because it's been a while since we talked about Milton, just to get an understanding of where the board's kind of feelings are about Milton. Lisa?
So for the board's knowledge, remember that Milton Park it's actually past its useful life, a wooden structure. We're getting increasingly concerned, even with the repairs we've been doing, that we will have to take it down within the next year or 2. So that's the reality when you're talking about that. So we're looking for, if you're ready tonight, or we'll put on a December committee, do you want to replace a play feature at Milton? And there are some depictions up there, what we're thinking, it's more of a toddler park. So just wanted to open that up.
I think, and I think Stephanie, you and I have probably talked about Milton Park more than any other park since conception of me on the board at least. I struggle with Milton a lot, and we always call it poor Milton Park. My preference is, and I'll throw this, not my preferences, but I think there's a thought out there that we should consider. Do we put this 300,000 into Friends Park, which is just, it's a few blocks down. I know it's not a neighborhood park. It's a few blocks down. It needs the assistance there. And can we find a way to utilize Milton, picnic benches, lovely area, serene environment that does not necessarily have a playground, and will also not necessarily cost 300,000, because that's a lot of money for a small piece of property, where I think the money could get invested elsewhere. But that is just my point of view on this discussion.
And you guys know that I love this park. And I think that for the neighborhood, it's probably meaningful. So it'd be interesting to get feedback
Yeah.
on it. I mean, I think that it's not one where I would invest a lot. But
Agree.
I think minimal replacement. I don't know what I would consider this a flex project. Let's see how the other projects come in and they're priced, and then
Yeah.
we have a more in-depth conversation about Milton.
I think that's fair. I think, the fact that we've talked about it for 6 to 8 years and no one has really come to the conclusion of, hey, we got to do something. To me, that's like we keep kicking this can down the road. I think looking at it as a flex project, if there's money left over, is probably the right way to do it. But it would certainly not be my top priority, given where I think Friends Park is and the investment we need to make there too.
We have no problem doing flex project, but just realize that chances are it would come down before that it would flex its way up, I guess you could say.
Well, I think-
So just be prepared for that.
Yeah, and I think to the point of waiting to see how the other projects kind of shuffle out in terms of costs. We obviously have the budget numbers that we're assigning tonight. Some of these projects that we'll see that are on the tail end of the 3 and 4 years of this 4-year plan, we won't, know those shaken out costs for 3 or 4 years. At that point, it might have passed for Milton. So with that said, this is built tonight to kind of set budget numbers. So when we get into designs, that's the budget number we're giving to architects and engineers to work within. So I think from that vantage point, that's where I would kind of look at Milton. Again, we can absolutely, it's a non-referendum project. We can table this conversation for a soon-to-come meeting, or
Yeah.
if the board wants to push it
And
back
Lisa,
further.
just remind me, this was the old Takef playground.
Yes.
What was there before it was the old Takef playground? Do we know?
I tried to look at historic aerial footage. It looked to me that there was still a playground there even 25 years ago. I would assume it was also a small timber form playground, but I don't know
Okay.
specifically what that was. So I would assume it's been a 2 to 5 tot lot mini park that entire time. But one other thing just to consider is that if we remove an asset like that from our inventory, it does change our quantities when it comes to our levels of service. So not to say that it would drastically impact that, but we could provide that information too, that if we just removed a mini park from our inventory, if that moves us from the threshold that we are supposed to be in for level of service. So
I definitely think it's something that I would want to have a community meeting before making a final decision.
Sure.
So that's perfect. Oh, Stephanie?
That's a hard one there, just because in the neighborhood, they're gonna want it.
They're gonna
you
want-
know?
exactly.
So like that, while I agree, it's like, we know what we're gonna hear, and I think there was another park we did that on, and we got like, oh, I want a basketball court, I want this, like, they're always gonna want something. We've done fixes here, which have been great, that have kept this in the inventory for a few years. I'd be interested to see, Aaron, like, I know you do the the
I
footage or
actually have it
whatever.
right in front of me, the
Do you have
data.
Of
numbers?
course she does.
Well, Milton's a little skewed because of the goats this year. In the last 12 months, it had 1.8 thousand visitors. Previous years, it was 550 in 23, 668 in 22, 814 in 21.
Well,
It's
can you-
pretty
can you take away the
comparable. It's about 600 people.
Okay.
It's pretty comparable to Astor, which had 1.3 in the last 12 months. Previous year, 23, 664 at Astor, 550 at Milton. that gives you a little apples to apples.
Yeah, a little
What,
bit.
what is it for friends?
I didn't run that one. I can.
We should just run it. I mean, that's a
Well,
flagship.
Friends is, I would say, a community park,
We
not a
were
neighborhood.
looking
park.
at,
Yeah.
Agreed, but it's not.
Pocket Park is more
Yeah.
Astor, but again, like Astor is a less serviced area. West School is there, but sometimes it's not always available because it's a school. Like you make a good point, Friends is very, close to that location. So is it a necessity that we have it? Probably not. If we take it away, are the neighbors gonna be upset? Of course, because anytime we take anything away, they'd be upset. But, it'd be good to price this out. We probably know it's probably, like you said, 300. Like we kind of know doing other ones. It always kind of comes out to that. So I agree. It's a lot to spend. I don't think it's like a necessity. I think if you took it out, like if this comes down because it's at the end of its useful life, which is a risk, you may see like people may not get a lot of complaints.
I think one of the things that, bringing my work life into my park district life that we're trying to figure out is it better to have, and the analogy here is clubs in an airport. We have these huge airports. It's better to have 4 small clubs that are kind of expensive to run, expensive to maintain, 4 kitchens, 4 bartenders, or do you have 2 sort of massive clubs out there where you can kind of get some efficiencies or economies of scale? And that's exactly what I see Milton as. And so depending upon the philosophy of the park district, do we want to continue with neighborhood parks? If we do, we should invest in Milton. Do we want to continue to have really nice features at a Woodlawn, a Duke, a Friends Park? Then we should invest in those. And probably not going to answer it tonight, but that's
Well,
where my head is.
yeah.
To me, that's about the character of
I-
Glencoe and
yeah.
having neighborhood parks, and something that's nice is that basically anywhere you live in Glencoe, you can walk to a
Yep.
park and makes it special. So
And that is our mandate, is a mandate in NRPA for a 10-minute walk to any park
Yeah.
is what the goal you're supposed to achieve. So, I guess I would be strongly against just doing 3 or 4 big community parks.
Yeah,
That's,
I'm not saying that we should go one way or the other. I'm just saying that's the debate that I think that we need to discuss. And if that's the discussion, then,
So why
we
don't-
could-
I just
Yeah.
think that we can't start with the discussion about Milton.
Yep.
Yeah,
Let's
we-
let's
we-
table
we can move on.
this.
Yeah.
Let's table this till December committee.
Mhm.
And if you would please give me any questions or any data that you would like prior to that meeting, that would be helpful for discussion purposes. If you could bring those or email them to me so that we're ready for that committee meeting. That's exactly the direction we wanted. If there's more discussion, which there is, let's table that
Yep.
for December committee.
Can I have 30 seconds?
You absolutely can.
Okay. One of the things I really like about the different parks is they all sort of serve a different purpose or a different age group or location. They're specialized, and things get added to those that I didn't even know existed. And I remember when we had the dedication services for Lakefront Park on these new little toadstools, and there was some 18-month-old kid standing on this toadstool, and they slipped and like fell. And I thought, oh no, it's just opened, and it's so well designed that they kind of hit it and bounced off, and they said, oh, and they got up and walked off.
Ah,
I don't know what you might put into that park. I don't know I'd like to see how you differentiate it. But if it fits as a unique park with certain attributes, yeah, I would like to hear more.
That's good. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
So I guess for the remainder of this presentation, we'll understand that West Park is right now on hold, so we can kind of factor that out of these kind of layouts. So now that we talked about kind of the grouping of projects for our 4-year CIP, the next few slides are going to be the projects broken down by year. We'll eventually get to the timeline, which you have in front of you, but just kind of going year by year. And a couple of things to note. So we had several factors to consider as we're figuring out how to time these projects and how to progress through these projects. The timing of the bond issuance and spend down requirements, the current stage of planning and design development that we're in on these projects, the amount of time needed to go through the community input process and properly vet the projects, the length of time to get to construction and through construction. And then one of the major ones that you'll see here pretty soon is the logistical constraints. Specifically when we talk about work down at the beach, you'll see that the beach project is proposed to be a 3-phase project, and that's really because of the amount of work that has to take place and understanding that our construction season gets really, interrupted by the beach season. So we kind of lose from mid-May until end of August. So for a project like that, we have to consider the logistics of tackling a project of that size. So those are kind of just the lenses that we were looking through as we're considering how to lay out these projects and progressions. So with that said, proposed for this upcoming year is construction of West Park. That is proposed to go forward regardless of OSLAD award. We would intend to have the design done in such a way that allows us to go OSLAD route or non-OSLAD route, knowing that those amenities need to get addressed. We've already gone through the community input process on that project. So at this point, we're looking to move into the next phase, which would be final design and then out to bidding and construction. We have the Shelton Racket Courts slated for next year. That would be assuming we would do West, Shelton would be the last of our racket courts that would be turned over or renovated. The picture was on the previous slide, I believe, but that one is getting to a point where we have, inch wide cracks on the surface, and it's going to start to significantly impact play. That project, we would likely have to go again through probably at least one more round of community discussion to determine whether we have any pickleball there or not, and then has to go through design and then certainly construction. The greenhouse is proposed for this year. That as well would need to go through community input and design pretty quickly here to get that one lined up. And part of the logic there with the greenhouse, as you see as we move towards the maintenance facility, is to get the greenhouse moved before we demo the maintenance center. So the way we try to lay out the slides and really the plan here is we have our bank of construction projects taking place in any given year and a bank of planning input, community input and design for the next year or subsequent years projects. So on the construction side, those were the projects. At the same time, we'll be going through the community input and design process on the maintenance center and ball field here at TAKIF, as well as phases 1 and 2 of Glencoe Beach. Phase 1 is proposed to be the boardwalk, sun shelter, and trellis. And phase 2 is proposed to be the playground, spray feature, storage, lockers, Saffron Beach House, interior renovations, and boating beach improvements. Backing up real quick, when it comes to West Park, we will engage with the school district about potentially completing that walking loop. It's currently designed to be really an out and back to get to the amenities for ADA accessibility. We'll talk to the school district, given it's on their property and shared use. If we could stop at each slide, or we can wait till we get to the larger timeline at the end. Stop me at any time. Otherwise, I'll move on to 2026. So then when we get into calendar year 2026, we're then going to propose to be doing construction on the maintenance center and ball field here at TAKIF, as well as Glencoe Beach Phase 1, boardwalk, sun shelters, and trellis. At the same time, we'll then start community input and design for Friends Park. Just a couple things to note with the maintenance center. Again, a lot of logistical considerations to have, given its location, given that we have to continue our operations during and throughout construction. So that's a project that certainly warrants this upcoming year for full, design, development, and considerations in order to get us to that point lined up for construction. So then as we move into calendar year 27, we then are doing construction on Glencoe Beach Phase 2, which again is the playground, spray features, storage, lockers, boating beach improvements, and beach house interior renovations, as well as the construction on Friends Park. Again, Glencoe Beach, these phase projects are split out across 3 years. During those given years, they're also split out across that beach season. So it would be spring work, pause for beach season, fall work, much like we saw with the crib wall project here the other year. And with Friends Park, again, it's a project that's going to probably require a lot of community input, and it's going to be in a location that's going to be tricky to do construction, just given the downtown. So again, giving ourselves lots of lead time to line these things up, have discussions. And just backing up to a higher level, when we get into these community input meetings, I know that it's something we'll want our architects and engineers involved as well as board meetings to make sure we have all the minds involved in these projects, hearing what the community has to say. So while we're doing construction on those 2 projects, we would then be going through community input and design on the final of our 4-year community or capital improvement plan projects, as well as the last project for the referendum batch. And that would be Glencoe Beach Phase 3. That's the stairs, the ramps, and the retaining walls. This is done in such a way that we want to do the stairs, ramps, and retaining walls last in this grouping of projects. We don't want to do all the work on the access to the beach and then turn around the next year or two and have construction traffic coming down that new infrastructure to do the beach amenities, if that makes sense. So hopefully that kind of logically makes sense in how we're proposing to lay out these plans. And I think everyone has the timeline in front of you. So just to know, this is, a tentative timeline of the proposed project. It's obviously barring board discussion and agreement with the progression. Also, as importantly, it's gonna likely shift, change, slide once we have architects, engineers under contract, get into the community input process and start to refine some of these timeframes. So really the way this is tried to be and showcase everything is the top horizontal line. We just have the next 4 years broken down by month. Far left column is each of our projects. Under each of those projects are the stages within those projects: community input, design, bidding, construction. And it's trying to show you that layout of here's where we start the project, here's how long we expect it to take, here's where it ends. Again, understanding that this might shift this way or that way once we get into design. Any initial questions, thoughts?
I really appreciate how you laid it out this way. I think it makes sense. I have one question. I think we talked about this before, so apologize if I forget the answer. Are you getting help to do this?
Next slide.
Thank
Yeah.
goodness. I don't think you're gonna need a project manager or
Yeah,
two.
we
we'll
have
go
a
to that
slide
next.
later we have a slide later in the presentation, a couple slides down that'll cover most of that. But certainly it's a lot of projects, it's exciting stuff, and we'll make sure we have that support to complete it.
I think my only concern is you've got 3 months, January, February, March. January is a sort of a tougher month. You got spring break in March, but you got January, February, March where you want to get community input for the greenhouse, for Milton, for the maintenance field, and for beach phase 1 and beach phase 2. So I think just be careful about overloading the community with, there are going to be people who are really involved, and I love that.
Yeah.
But people probably can't give up every Wednesday to do that. So just think about how you do it. And maybe it's different people, but just put in the back of your mind.
And there's going to be more nuance to when these input meetings happen, and we'll wait a little bit on the beach stuff because that project's not kicking off for the following year. We in our mind we know which projects need to have the most expedited timeline for that stuff, but absolutely understood to not.
I think the layout is great. It's ambitious.
Okay. Good. So then we can move on to the 4-year budget. Again, you can, for now, just kind of ignore Milton until a decision's made on that. So what we're trying to show here is the spending breakdown on the 7 major projects. There's more than 7 up there, but they're grouped together for the purposes of conversation. What we're showing here in yellow highlighted is the referendum projects. Totaling up to a cost of $14.7 million, which is aligned with our expected bond issuance amount. The remaining projects in teal are the non-referendum projects, with Milton included, totaling $2.6 million. The combined total being $17.4 million for this grouping of projects over the next 4 years. I know that John will be covering in a bit here the more in-depth bond issuance information. But just to kind of tie everything together, these numbers all tie back to our heat sheets. The timelines tie back to the heat sheets, and the 5% annual growth. It should all be aligned. So now talking a little bit about architects and engineering services to Commissioner Covey's question before. So there are a few projects we are going to recommend construction management services like we had with Weinberg. They're going to be the big giant projects, the maintenance center and ball field, and the Glencoe beach phases. That's where we would have essentially an on-site, full-time, potentially part-time, and some of the beach stuff construction manager, somebody that can have eyes on that major work at all times to make sure things aren't being missed or corners cut. We will plan to go out for RFQ for any construction management services. So we would expect to have a conversation at a later date about that end of things. In terms of architect and engineering services, so the actual design and having those people designing the projects in the community input meetings, we kind of have this belief that we should work with architects and engineers that we have a familiarity with, that we've been happy with, and that, have a familiarity with our parks, our facilities. So with that in mind, what staff is recommending is White and Company. They're the architects that designed Weinberg Family Recreation Center, as well as the fitness center here, the sensory room, as well as the kiln. We've been very happy with their work, have close connections to them. They understand the community. So we would recommend them to be the team for Glencoe Beach phases 1 and 2, except for the playground, as well as the maintenance and ball field portions of the project, as well as the greenhouse. Now with the greenhouse, just a little caveat note, the greenhouse is currently proposed to be a kit build. So the architect engineering services we would be asking White for on that would be more civil drawings, utilities, that sort of stuff, not designing for us a custom greenhouse. On the landscape architect end, we're recommending Upland Design Group for Friends Park, potentially Milton Park, as well as the beach playground. Upland Design Group is the firm that worked on our recent comprehensive master plan. So they have a very recent familiarity with all our parks, as well as the strategic goals that came out of the comprehensive plan. Additionally, for landscape architects, Hitchcock for West Park. They've been on the project since the beginning. They've taken us through conceptual design and budget. So I think the right course of action would be to stick with them through final completion of that project. On Glencoe Beach Phase 3, so this is the infrastructure, retaining walls, stairs, ramps. We would recommend Seabell, Christopher Burke Engineering. They were the firm that did the crib wall as well as the overlooks and I believe portions of the Connect Glencoe Trail. And then lastly, Erickson Engineering, much smaller portion of the projects, but the Shelton Racket Courts, they did the courts recently at Watts and Central. So that's kind of the standpoint that we're coming from, is that we believe that we should use people we're familiar with, that know our community, that know the projects and the facilities. Again, with the construction management services, we'll go out for RFQ, get qualifications, and have a conversation about that at the time. I guess from that standpoint, looking for if the board is in agreement with that approach or has different thoughts on that before we talk about moving forward with engaging them for proposals.
So we don't have to do an RFQ for the architect?
We don't have to.
It's a
Um,
professional service. but
Professional
you do not.
service. And we would, we have previous projects and can get comparable project proposals from other districts to, price check percentage basis. Typically, they're going to be in that 8 to 12% of cost of construction.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to. A big project.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The parks that Hitchcock has done aren't my favorites. I don't think they're uber creative. I know they've been on it since the beginning, so and I know you want to keep a good relationship, but I don't know, maybe just keep that in mind.
Yeah, the reason we're moving to Upland for some of those is to have a little bit of different take, because Hitchcock has done so many in our park system. Upland comes very recommended. They do a lot of park districts in Chicago and other areas. Hitchcock seems to be very saturated in this area, and I'm afraid we're going to get the same playgrounds as other
And-
people. So that's why I want to.
One thing-
Upland also does a fantastic job with community meetings, and that was important, we thought, for Friends
And
and
one-
the beach.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm saying that the opposite. Like I'm
Oh.
all for Upland. I'm saying Hitchcock, I find to be not very creative.
Yeah, so that's why, because West is already designed, we don't want to repay
Okay.
for that, so I agree, so yeah, thank you.
Into the,
So we're saying the same thing.
and if we do move forward with Milton Park, which I know will be discussed later, but if we have that done and designed by Upland, we could get a sneak peek into their process and their product before we have to commit to Friends design and have to commit to the beach, because that's not proposed to be done until next year. Again, just to point that out. So
I'm a little bit like Carol over there. I'm surprised we're not doing a little bit more RFQing. It seems like I see the pros and cons of both sides. Like, hey, like effectively we've RFQ'd these people before. These are the ones to do it. We're splitting it up. If we don't like Upland, we can lean a little more on Hitchcock and vice versa. So I kind of see both sides. I'm okay with it. But I also want to make sure that we're doing things that, maybe it's in another phase, that we're bringing some new blood in and getting some new views. And here we're using people we're familiar with. If there's other people that have great ideas and great concepts, we are boxing them out. So just be aware of that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in another phase where we bring them in.
But-
And second thing, so that's one. Second thing is that I'm hoping that we are also cognizant of, this is taxpayer money. We should be judicious with it, but we should also give opportunities to, small businesses, minority-owned businesses, and things like that somewhere along these projects. So those are my 2 cents. I'm not saying change it, but I understand why you're going with this list of architects, but further down, I think we need to make sure that we're doing RFQs that are appropriate for projects these size.
Well, I think that's why we're bringing Upland in, because someone knew it is a woman-owned business.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
See,
so,
gives you an
yeah.
opportunity. You should have told us that before. I would've made
Same
something.
with, we will be doing an RFQ for the construction management,
Yeah.
because we were not thrilled with the construction management at Weinberg, so we're doing RFQ for that.
Good.
For sure. White has also done a lot of the design for, or conceptual designs for the maintenance, and it's pretty
That's great.
pretty standard. So
Yeah,
I feel
it's just
very
one-
confident with this
Yeah,
slate.
if you feel confident, I
Yeah.
also like the idea, like, we only have 4 years to spend this money. And
Right.
so if there's opportunities for us to fast track things where we feel comfortable, I feel comfortable. As long as you're telling me we are gonna RFQ things down the road,
Yeah.
because I don't
Yep.
wanna just hand out projects.
Yeah.
That actually brings up a question. Do we have to spend it within 5 years? What's the rule?
So I think
So
John
we'll
will,
get that in a
presentation
second.
will cover that more in
Yeah, but
detail.
yes.
I'm always one slide ahead, and I
Yeah.
apologize for that.
Okay, so it
Yes.
sounds like we're, I think, generally in agreement with this approach, and the ones that we would have to, reach out to immediately would be Hitchcock for West Park, White for the beach phases, and the greenhouse, just given their time frame. So, and then Milton, we can wait on again. If we do move forward with it, it's a smaller project. It's not going to take an enormous amount of time to design and construct. So,
Is everybody good?
of course, just with all our projects, we'll look into potential supplemental funding. Of course, grants, whether that is a potential park grant, an OSLAD, a Great Lakes, St. Louis Coastal Initiative grant for stuff down at the beach, or line item grants. There's opportunities in some of these projects for dedications and naming rights, particularly places like West and Milton. Naming rights could be an option. The greenhouse or certain project elements within the beach project also could be up for potential naming rights to offset some costs. And then just a final couple notes on my end. Again, the timelines are currently estimates. Once we get architect and engineers under contract, we can then start to line up actual dates for community input, actual realistic timeframes based on those community input timeframes and construction windows. Budget numbers are based off of comparable projects, either from our end or other districts, as well as engineering estimates. And those budget numbers will be given to design teams as parameters to work within in their budgets. And just keeping that in mind as we go through community input and go through engagement, just trying to keep the guardrails on of what the project cost is kind of set to be coming out of this meeting tonight. And then hopefully kind of avoid the scope creep and type of stuff if we kind of set those parameters right out the gate. I think with that, any other questions or discussions from my portion? Otherwise, I think we'll kick it over to John.
All right, thank you, Kyle. And I'm actually going to kick it over to Andrew Kim with PMA, who's joining us tonight. He's a director with PMA's Public Finance Division. PMA's been helping us out the past 6 months with scenarios and bond issuance options as we get this referendum approved. And just some of the considerations regarding spend down, as Carol had alluded to, exemptions, and also the potential for an arbitrage rebate. So with that, I will turn things over to Andrew.
Thanks for having me here. I think I can just, okay, yep. Excuse me. So in general, the two topics that I wanted to kind of address regarding the bond issue are the impact of changing interest rates on the borrowing size and the timing of the bond issue. Those, I think, would be the two relevant questions for the Park District, given the success of the referendum last night. By the way, congratulations to the Park District. So when we were first started working with the district, we provided a preliminary scenario in June of 2024. And we were told that the objective was to maintain annual debt service payments at approximately $1.03 million per year for 25 years. That is approximately the debt service payment for the bond issue that is expiring, or that has expired, or is about to expire? Yeah, next year, yeah. So essentially keeping the debt service payment the same, the question is how much can you then borrow with a final term of 25 years? Park districts, according to Illinois statute, can go out for 25 years. Park district bond issues can go out for 25 years. And based on where interest rates were at the time, the number that we determined was $14.7 million in project funds. And that's probably a familiar number to you all because that was the number used in the ballot language for the referendum. Now, as interest rates change, the district's borrowing amount will also change given the objective above, which is $1.03 million per year for 25 years in debt service payments. So if interest rates increase, then the districts will not be able to borrow as much and the borrowing amount decreases. If interest rates decrease, the district will be able to borrow more. And the annual payments will remain the same regardless of what interest rates do. It's not unlike a home mortgage. As interest rates are lower, you can afford more home, and as interest rates increase, you have to cut back on the purchase price of the home. As of September 27th, the last update that we provided to the district, both the 10-year and the 20-year municipal market data index, which is what we know as the MMD, it's the index for the municipal bond market, how municipal bonds are priced, had come down by about 30 basis points, and earlier terms decreased by as much as 86 basis points. So there are MMD rates for every term from 1 to 30, and some of the earlier terms, the years 1 through 5, came down by as much as 86 basis points. But on the middle and longer end of the yield curve, they came down by roughly 30 basis points. So as of September 27th, PMA estimated that the district could borrow more than the $14.7 million in the ballot language, and the number was approximately $14.925 million. And this number may and will continue to change until the bonds are priced, which is the date at which the interest rates are locked in. So even though the ballot question requested a bond issue of $14.7 million, the district can actually borrow an amount that's dictated by interest rate levels at the time of pricing. And so as of September 27th, interest rates were such that the district could borrow $14.9 million. If interest rates stay at that same level, then the district could borrow $14.9 million, even though the ballot language was only for $14.7 million. And the reason for that is because the par amount of the bonds cannot exceed $14.7 million per the ballot language, but municipal bonds are issued with premium, allowing the par amount to remain constant and the proceeds amount to change accordingly. So you would have a par amount of $14.7 million, but additional premium would be generated in order to borrow an amount or receive in proceeds an amount that is dictated by where interest rates might be at the time. So this graph here is a picture of historical interest rates. We're looking at a time frame of January 2003 till today. Actually, not till today, till November 4th, which was Monday, which is obviously the day before the election. As a result of the election outcome last night, interest rates actually increased pretty significantly today. There was about a 15 to 20 basis point increase throughout the entire yield curve, which is a fairly dramatic movement for a single day. So you can see a couple of things to highlight. The gray backdrop is what the Federal Reserve is doing with the Fed funds target rate. You can see how over the last couple of years it had increased pretty significantly with a very steep slope, although at the very far right end of the graph, you can see that the Fed had started cutting the Fed funds target rate in September of this year. You can see the impact of various events, two that are highlighted, the spike there in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic, as well as a more recent spike due to inflationary pressures. But as though inflation levels have come down, interest rates have come down accordingly. Now this graph is a more recent graph of interest rates. So we're looking only at where interest rates were from January of this year till now. So you can see that interest rates when the ballot question was determined in June of 2024 were a little bit higher than where they were when PMA provided the most recent scenarios to the district in September of 2024. And since September of 2024, they've actually come up again. And so as of November 4th, we're kind of right around right now where we were when the ballot question was determined back in June. Again, as a result of last night, the interest rates are even higher now than what the graph is showing. So as I mentioned, interest rates will continue to change. And once we determine a pricing date, that will ultimately determine how much the district actually can borrow. And if interest rates continue to go up between now and whenever the bonds are priced, that the borrowing amount will come down a little bit. The other item that we wanted to mention was arbitrage rebate. And the reason why we're mentioning this is because arbitrage is a phenomenon that will or may impact the timing of the bond issue, when the bonds are actually issued. So, and I'll go into, these slides will explain how that's the case. Arbitrage generally refers to investing tax-exempt bond proceeds in taxable investments that provide higher investment yields than the yield paid on the tax-exempt bonds. So you might borrow at a rate of 4%, and in today's environment, you can actually invest those bond proceeds at a rate of, let's say, 4.5%. That 0.5% difference between your borrowing rate and your reinvestment rate is the arbitrage that we're talking about here. But the federal government doesn't like that units of government like the district might earn positive arbitrage because they, in allowing you to issue tax-exempt bonds, they're essentially providing a subsidy through lower borrowing costs, and therefore they are foregoing tax revenues that investors would otherwise be paying if the bonds were not tax-exempt. So the district should not get a double benefit with the positive arbitrage. So in most cases, generally speaking, if units of government are generating positive arbitrage, that positive arbitrage needs to be rebated back to the federal government or repaid to the federal government. And that payment is due every 5 years after the issuance of the bonds or after the arbitrage calculation is made, whichever comes first. Typically, if you spend all of your bond proceeds within 5 years, you're going to do the calculation at the time because you don't want this arbitrage payment hanging over your head. So if you spend all the bond proceeds within 2 years, you'd likely do the calculation at the end of 2 years, and then you have to make the rebate payment within 60 days of the calculation. But there are certain exceptions that allow the district to avoid making the rebate payment. Yes. It's just the rebate. It's just the arbitrage. There's no additional amount. No, correct. So 2 exceptions. One is the small issuer exception, and the second is the spend down exception. The small issuer exception is when a unit of government issues $5 million or less of tax-exempt bonds in a single calendar year. And the exception expires 3 years after issuance. The spend down exceptions will be explained in additional slides. There are 3 types of spend down exceptions. There's the 6-month spend down exception, the 18-month, and the 24-month or 2-year exception. And if any one of these spend down exceptions are met, then no rebate is due. So this 6-month spend down exception is if all of the bond proceeds are spent within 6 months of the issue date. The 18-month spend down exception is when 15% of the bond proceeds are spent within 6 months, 60% are spent within the first 12 months, and 100% are spent within the first or within 18 months. And then the most generous spend down exception is the 2-year or 24-month spend down exception. And it applies to bonds that are deemed construction bonds. So essentially, at least 75% of the bond proceeds have to be used on construction expenditures. And this would be signed off on by your bond counsel. So your bond counsel would have to determine whether or not the bonds constitute construction bonds. The schedule for this is 10% within the first 6 months, 45% within the first 12 months, 75% within the first 18 months, and 100% within 24 months. Now, if the district misses any one of these thresholds, it no longer qualifies for the spend down exception. So if you spend 10% within the first 6 months, 45% within the first 12 months, but only 65% within the first 18 months, then you no longer qualify and you are obligated to make the rebate payments. All of the positive arbitrage that you had earned up to that point would be, and for the duration of the existence of the bond proceeds, you would have to pay back to the federal government. So a couple of different options that the district can consider in order to take advantage of the small issuer exception. Well, option number one doesn't allow you to take advantage of the small issuer exception. And so you would issue $14.7 million all at once, and therefore you would not qualify for the small issuer exception. And per the current project schedule, the district would not qualify for the spend down exception as well. Option number two is where you do take advantage of the small issuer exception. And this would be where you issue roughly $5 million. It's about $4.65 million of project proceeds. The additional, $350,000 would be for issuance costs and, other necessary fees of the financing. You would issue $4.65 million in 2024 and qualify for the small issuer exception on this portion of the financing. And then you would issue the remaining 10 million plus in 2025 with the intention of spending down the proceeds quickly enough to qualify for the 2-year spend down exception. And of course, because you would be issuing a smaller amount of bonds in 2025, the dollar amount per the percentages of the spend down exception would be smaller with the $10 million bond issue than with the $14.7 million bond issue. So it would be easier to meet the 24-month spend down exception in a scenario like this. Well, you can, whether or not the district benefits from this depends on interest rates. But the numbers here on this slide would assume yes. Yes, exactly. So the two bond issues would actually be priced 2 weeks apart. And so there isn't a whole lot of time for interest rates to make a significant amount of movement. However, if something significant does happen, for example, last night we had a presidential election and interest rates shot up by 20 basis points. But in most markets, 2 weeks time period isn't a significant amount of time for interest rates to move dramatically. But you're right that in the scenario that we created, we assumed that interest rates would stay the same between all options, all scenarios.
Is there enough time to do this in December, given it's November 7th?
That is a very good question, and there is, although if you look at the yellow line, is there really significant benefit to doing the the 2 issuance option, because there is some interest rate risk that you are taking, and there is more administrative expense as well as headache in order to do the 2 issuance options. You're issuing 2 different bond series. But if you did want to go with the 2-issue option, there is time. We would have to move pretty quickly. But we would be able to meet the timeline that would be required to issue 5 million this year.
And Andrew, that's separate rating calls, separate post-issuance compliance for the 2 issuances.
So I think the rating calls we would probably be able to combine them, but the fees would probably be a little bit higher for 2 issues. And the preparation of the official statement, you would have to prepare 2 different official statements. A lot of it would be similar material since there's not going to be any, material difference between your finances in the 2 weeks. But you would still have to go through the process and prepare 2 different POSs.
Right. And separate post-issuance compliance.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, we did clear it with legal counsel. That was my first question too, that it's 2 weeks apart. It just felt like, but we did run it by Chapman Cutler and they did say that it is allowable.
That's right.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
This is common from having, well, I worked at a rating agency. so
Yes.
We saw this all the time.
It is pretty common. There's another designation called bank qualified, which is essentially it offers better interest rates for those governmental entities that issue $10 million of bonds or less in a single calendar year. So some districts might want to borrow $11 million. So they wouldn't qualify for what's called bank qualified interest rates. And so what they would do is they'd issue, let's say, 9 million in December and 2 million in January of the following year. Again, this kind of straddle approach is what we call it. So why do the smaller issue in? Oh, so 4.99 in December of 2024. We just added a little bit of cushion there. For issuance costs and it would be on the total amount issued.
So the potential premium could come into play there.
Yes, exactly. It would be on the total proceeds generated by the bond issue. Mm-hmm.
The actual proceeds will be more than the 4.65 because of the premium on the sale.
Exactly. Correct. Yes. According to our analysis, the benefit would be roughly $10,000, correct? $10,000 over the life of the 25-year bonds.
And Bart, that's why I mentioned that there is for the fairly minimal payoff on the front end here. There is post issuance and administrative tracking. There's more that goes into tracking 2 separate issuances than just keeping them all into one. Not to mention the time crunch that President Spain had alluded to.
Yep.
I would, lean more toward option 1.
583 to 573. 24,583 versus 24,573. So roughly $10,700. That is so the red line is the actual debt service payments that you would make. The green line,
We've made 13.
Um,
You get,
yeah,
am I reading that wrong?
no, that's right. I think you're right.
100,000 more payments are what you, but you end up getting an investment of, I thought you were getting an investment of 37,000. So you get 37,000. So you're doing a lot of work.
Yes. Yes.
Still free money.
Oh, that's
I
a
don't know
lot.
if it's worth it, but I
Yeah.
Seems like you'd have to double disclose for everything.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, there's still the interest rate risk.
That's true.
there's a reason you brought it.
Well, I originally proposed this idea conceptually without actually doing the math in my conversation with the administration. And then when we actually did the math,
The reason we brought it to you is because the first thought in our mind was we're going to have to pay arbitrage. So what options do we have to limit that arbitrage rebate? We wanted to take advantage of this interest rate environment with the proceeds as much as possible. And to Andrew's point, when we went through the analysis, that was really the only way to come to the conclusion that it is just the $10,000 difference here.
Lisa, what is effective? How much? And now what?
30,000. 30?
3 times more. Your discretionary is 3 times more than the value of this.
Mhm. Correct.
Can I ask you a question that so the Fed meets tomorrow, the expectation 25 basis point cut, the rates went up today, or yields went up today because of the election. Does that already factor in the expectation that the Fed's going to cut 25 basis points tomorrow? Like, are we on for a roller coaster in your opinion? How does that shake out? And then between now and January, I should know this, but like, are there other, there's a December meeting too?
a Fed meeting,
Yeah.
I believe there's a November and a December.
Information.
Yeah.
And then there probably wouldn't be another meeting between December and January. That would all be like, and there wouldn't be any new
Yeah.
government changes. or
Well,
anything between now and then. I'm just trying to think like,
yeah.
what's gonna happen?
If the district were to go with option 2, you would price the bonds in December. Both issues, you would price it in December. One would close in December, and the second one would close in January.
Uh-huh.
The two pricings, though, would have to be 15 days apart, 2 weeks apart. So there is still some interest rate risk there. In terms of, I typically think that the market does price in expectation of what the Fed's going to do in advance of the Fed meeting occurring. Having said that, the market has been a little bit, there hasn't been a whole lot of clarity from the market about what they expect the Fed to do. I think at one point when the Fed started cutting rates back in September, there was the market had priced in, I read 925 basis point cuts throughout 2025. And then when the September inflation report came out, which was released in October, the market revised their expectation because inflation was hotter than expected and it wasn't as controlled as the Fed expected it to be. And so, towards the end of October, the market was pricing in 25 basis point rate cuts throughout 2025.
I guess
Now-
what I'm thinking
yeah.
is that, fortunately, we're not meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have more of an idea of what we think the Fed might do between now and January.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a fair statement. Yeah, I would agree with that. The question is, how is the market going to navigate what the Fed says and what the results of the Fed meeting are in light of the presidential election results from last night as well. I think
It's just gonna be a lot of uncertainty now in January.
yeah, I am not in the business of guessing where interest rates go. I'll tell you that
I mean,
much.
yes,
Yeah.
I just wanted your opinion. 'Cause it's just trying to figure out if there was an additional motivation to price in December versus but maybe not.
So to get all the bonds done in this year versus waiting till next year.
Yeah.
Um,
And is December usually like a calm month?
well, I think you do have you tend to have a lot of supply in December because people are trying to get bonds issued in before the end of the calendar year. So obviously a lot of supply does lend to higher interest rates. The drawback though is that I should say the benefit of moving as fast as possible, the faster you move, the less interest rate risk you take because you're locking in rates. And none of us know what's going to happen with interest rates in January or February, March of next year. So there is an incentive to try to move quickly and get things done. Having said that, the Fed could say, inflation is under control and we are going to continue to cut rates. In which case, rates in January, February, March of next year could be lower than where they are right now.
I think I have a lot of anxiety about about the
Yeah.
inauguration in January. And I
Mhm.
think right now there's a lot of hypotheticals or assumptions about economic growth, right, versus actual policy. And I feel like we could get to January and it could be really volatile, potentially.
It could be.
And so I'm wondering if it's just safer. Yeah. Yeah. What do is it just me being anxious?
I fascinating, and I'm glad you guys did the analysis, but I be are it happy 14.7. I think get 14.7 in the we should get it and not have complications for $10. Like I'm with you. It seems goes where the world is going now. Rather play it safe. Then
So we still save 10,000 if we do it in December, right?
Correct.
We save
Yeah.
10,000 and have less.
Actually,
Right.
yeah, you're right. You're correct. Yes.
Yeah, it saves money and less interest rate risk because there's less that's going to happen between now and December than between now and potentially later in January.
sorry, do one issue.
No. Oh, I think it's because they both price in December. You don't have to take on the interest rate risk for whatever happens in January. And you'd be doing it issuing the bonds like right away in January. Right? Like it'd be like first week.
Well, yeah. So I think, Carol, what you're saying is if we do, there is a reason to do the 2-issue approach in December because we're pricing both bond issues in December. So there's not really an incentive to do the 1-issue approach in December because then you don't qualify for spend down exception for any of the 5 million. So price them both in December, have one close in December so that you qualify for the 5 million for the small issuer exception with that, and then have the other one close in January with the interest rates locked in.
It's like when you buy a house, you get your mortgage, right? And you know the rate before you come into your closing day. It doesn't just change on you all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think starting to one in January, lock in December, one issue in January, 10,000. Right?
Correct.
Life is a lot simpler. It's
But can you price in December?
you just said you.
No,
Can.
that's because you're doing the 2 issues.
But you could do it for 1 issue as well. Yes.
I mean, I don't understand. If we did 1 issue, and interest rates, magic wand, rates are the same, December 15th, January 15th.
Mhm.
Take it, December versus.
If you do 1 issue and interest rates don't change, there's not much difference. No.
I just want to get sure. this as not because a lot of extra booking, not a lot of.
But can we issue like the first week of January?
When you say issue, have the bonds closed or have the bonds price?
Like basically have the bonds price, like the earlier the better. I just want to get it.
I completely agree. I would want the rate. That's the rate.
I feel like the taxpayers not in the business of making money off of interest. If we, it's great. We ask the taxpayers to help us get 14.7 million. Get that in. About it, I would go because you're right. We don't know. Be able to get 14.9 in January. 5 in January.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was leaning toward option one, issuing them all at once. To Michael's question on, why did we go through this exercise? It's the $5 million ish small issuer exemption, avoiding that arbitrage, but it is also looking at that $10 million, the residual 10 million, and determining, we did go through the exercise of, can we get the spend down exception too within the 24 months? Given that wasn't feasible either, it really just made us realize that we go with the one issue. That's what we would be leaning toward. And I agree, taking what the market is giving us at this point is probably the route to go.
My thoughts are if there's a rate cut in December, we could benefit from that, but after that, there's really no benefit waiting. I don't see.
I mean, there is an expectation if inflation reports continue to be positive, as in not hot, then there is the expectation that Fed would continue to cut rates throughout 2025.
Yes, there is. Although I think this is my beliefs coming in here, but I'm just really worried about unleashing a bunch of policies day one, inauguration day. Well, you can't do the tax cuts yet. But you can talk about who's going to be in your administration. You can deport people. You can do all sorts of things that create chaos. I'd just rather not deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair position. That's as fair a position as any. Yeah.
I think I'm overreacting. Feel that.
I'll just say we typically are conservative with our policies. We have a conservative fund balance policy where we were conservative in our last issuance, not factoring in inflation. So I think that's being true to kind of how we approach our fiscal responsibility in our policy here, is to, not risk it.
I would add that, the long end of the yield curve did increase more than the short end of the yield curve as a result of last night's election. And which means there's a reversion back to a normally shaped yield curve. The arbitrage opportunity that the district is facing now is a function of an inverted yield curve because short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. So what we saw as a result of last night was something a little bit more like this, meaning the benefit from the small issuer exception is not as significant as even the $10,000. So if I were to do this analysis right now, given last night's results and where interest rates went today, I think it would be even less than $10,000. And if that trend continues, I think you will see less benefit from trying to capture the small issuer exception or other exceptions that allow you to keep arbitrage. I will say too, whether you price in December or January or February or March or whenever it might be, that if there is a significant amount of volatility, let's say we have a bond issue scheduled to price December 15th or whatever it might be, and there is a lot of volatility for whatever reason, we can always postpone the bond sale. You're not obligated to sell your bonds the day that you have scheduled to sell your bonds. Having said that, they could stabilize at a higher level at some point in the future, right? But typically, when there is a lot of volatility for a bond issue that we have scheduled, we don't necessarily price the bonds then. We wait for the market to stabilize and then price the bonds. So the next slide is just a breakdown of the issuance costs. And this is the one thing, right? We can't predict where interest rates will be even within a short 2-week period, but you can have a pretty good sense of what the issuance costs would be. And if you issue the bonds all at once, you are going to save on issuance costs by roughly, $10,000 or so, or $15,000. Of course, the analysis that we did here took into account the issuance costs that we have here. Now, when the district issues bonds, in order to qualify for tax exemption, you do have to certify, and I think it's going to be John's signature that certifies that the district reasonably expects to spend 85% of the bond proceeds within 3 years. And so we did this calculation here using Kyle's table of projects and project costs and the time frame that he provided as well. So $13.04 million or 88% would be expected to be completed within 3 years.
And this is where we were kind of analyzing, can we double dip on the exceptions, both the small issuer and the spend down, and we're not able to.
So there is this temporary period, and this is where you have to reasonably expect to spend 85%. You also have to reasonably expect to spend or contractually obligate 5% of a bond issue within 6 months of issuance. And you also have to diligently spend bond proceeds and provide evidence of such diligence. Qualifying for this temporary period is what would allow you to invest in securities that produce a materially higher yield than the bond yield. So you're allowed to invest in securities that provide arbitrage, but you're not necessarily allowed to keep that arbitrage unless you qualify for the exceptions that we discussed earlier. And after 3 years from the closing date on the bonds, tax-exempt bonds must be yield restricted and may not be invested in investments guaranteed by the federal government, except for U.S. Treasury securities.
And this, the expectation is this won't apply to us based on the schedule that we've mapped out with the 2020 non-ref bonds. We came pretty close to this even with the pandemic, which slowed down the spend down of those proceeds. But we didn't have that as an issue on our previous issuance either, and wouldn't anticipate it at this point on the new issue.
Oops, sorry, wrong way. And then the last slide here is a proposed or estimated timeline of events for 2025 issuance. Now, this was presuming that the district would go with the one issue option and therefore would wait until 2025-ish or first quarter of 2025 to issue the bonds. So it sounds like you may want to expedite the bond issue in order to mitigate as much interest rate risk as possible, in which case these dates would obviously not apply.
Just to be really careful that I mean, we have to kind of weigh that. I want to make sure that Kyle does it ahead of time. Then that puts us.
I mean, I read a lot of research today, like all day, and there's different opinions about where rates are going, but some people are even suggesting that rates will go up.
I have no idea, but that my thinking that no matter what, we know what interest rates are today. So I imagine that you fall, less volatility you could have in interest rates. Take this call that up to issuance. Files ready.
I think out of the discussion we just had previously, the direction we got with soliciting design services on the first batch of projects, Greenhouse being the first referendum project, as well as the first 2 phases of the beach, we would look to start lining up our architects and engineers.
And Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we get to the 36 months, it's not, I don't think it's like we're paying penalties. It's simply we can't invest or hold the proceeds in specific investment instruments, but we are, it's not like there's a penalty or we're paying additional. It's not like a major issue if we get to the 3 years. We just need to take special care of the proceeds then when we hit that 3-year mark, so that we're not earning the interest on specific investment instruments.
Correct.
And this is and the 14 and going one side. That kind of his theory is simple.
So too.
Definitely think we're
Although we'll find out tomorrow, but I think there'll be a rate cut tomorrow, and I think the Fed's going to take a pause until the new administration comes in, is what I think. And I think a lot of things could happen. So if we could issue in January, and that isn't too big of a rush.
I think there's
That'd
a lot
be
of
my
doomsday
preference.
scenarios on this side, and there's a lot of doomsday scenarios on that side in terms of rates, the economy, everything fluctuating one way or another. I think a conservative approach is easy. I think it's, like you said, it's exactly what we said our obligation was. I don't think rates are going to skyrocket at the same time. It's taxpayer money. Let's be mindful of that and just keep it as conservative and that's my opinion.
Yeah, I guess to that point, say interest rates go up drastic, something happens, interest rates go up by 50 basis. Your approach change.
We would be able to generate less proceeds.
Right. Like
And
we-
so I'd like to I'd like to, if possible, get as much proceeds as advertised
Yeah,
and have that be a floor. But I wouldn't want to risk that floor. Not that I think, oh my gosh, rates are gonna spike. It's so extreme that we can't meet it, but I don't know. And if we can, I think what you're saying is if we can meet as advertised without adding additional risk or the uncertainty that we may not hit it, we might as well do it.
well, I am asking that. I do think that's important, but my layperson knowledge base, if rates go up by 50 basis, say, holy cow, should wait 3 or 4 months to see what happens. We say, you know what, I still feel like we don't know what's going to happen. Sure, it's close.
I think if that were to happen, and Andrew, you'd probably advise that would just like wait till the market calms down because, well,
Basis points is a lot.
yeah, that
That's fair.
would be kind of probably an overreaction.
That's a half.
Okay,
It
that
Yeah.
helps me understand. Like, so we would.
Yeah.
may
It depends on what the rationale for it is.
Understand. I think we're aligned. Aligned. I want them.
Yeah.
If there jumps in it, we may want to.
Like, it depends on if the Fed's increasing rates or if the market just panics.
If there's a huge shift, like a huge rate increase, then, maybe we look at do we just issue to stay under the small issuer exemption in 2025? We don't necessarily need the rest of maybe it is wait until January of 26. And Andrew could speak to other approaches we could take where maybe we price them mid-year and then we issue in January. So I think we have some flexibility there. So if there is something drastic that happens, I think we need to have the discussion again. But there are other options at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if interest rates were to increase dramatically in a single day, you'd have to understand why that happened, right? What is the cause of that volatility? When the pandemic occurred in March of 2020, and you saw that spike in interest rates that we're showing there, I can tell you there were almost virtually no bonds being issued and being priced during that volatility. Everyone was on the sidelines, postponing their bond sales, waiting for the market to stabilize.
So question for John. So we don't even start to spend money until May of next year. And then I guess there's some more in July and August. So we would get the money and we're not trying to arbitrage and make a profit, but is it reasonable to assume that if rates don't change, you can invest the money and earn enough to cover the interest?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that would definitely
there's
be the
no-
approach.
If the rates don't change, there's no disincentive to issuing in December if we could.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. With that said, that is the end of our referendum questions and discussion. It is.
Well, I did learn some things as well this evening. So I just happened to obsess about the direction of rates for a few hours today.
Thank you, Andrew.
There is there's a lot of opinions, right?
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Be good to start the presentation?
Are you ready to start with the?
oh, I am sorry.
Yep. Okay. Go ahead, Bobby.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. We're going to do a different route now. We're going to talk about the 2024 Lakefront Report. Introduce Shannon Stevens, who's our Lakefront and Ice Manager. Shannon was in her first year at the beach, did a phenomenal job, as you'll see from the report. During the report, we're going to talk about the season and recap it. We're going to talk about some staff and some training we did, an operational review. We'll review the beach programs. We'll review the financials. We'll look at the survey results as we always do. We'll give you an update on how the Northbrook agreement and that data, and then we'll also talk about future considerations.
So jumping right into the season, some important dates to go over. The swimming beach opened on May 24th and went until about September 2nd. The boating beach opened May 11th, and then we just wrapped up the season October 13th. And then programming ran from June 10th to August 9th in conjunction with camps. So we offered two types of admission, season passes and daily admissions. So the Glencoe Beach Pass was $36 for residents and $72 for non-residents with the option to add guest passes. And then we had daily admission. It was $12 for residents and $24 for non-residents. And we offered daily admission Monday through Friday starting at noon. I'm happy to say this year we were fully staffed with about 76 staff members down at the beach. And this is compared to 62 staff in last year and 58 in 2022. So we really got those numbers up all the way from cashiers to our leadership staff. For training started in early May. It was about 20 hours of training for certain positions. Really wanted to invest more time in developing quality trainings for these staff. And offered continuing learning via in-services for every position, cashiers and lifeguards. As you can see, our beach staff expenses have increased. The last 5 years, we've really struggled to fully staff the beach, especially at the lifeguard position. Along with the minimum wage increase, that also compressed the 51% of returning staff we had and their wages. So all of that went up. To add on top of all of that, our total visits were up 30%, and we had favorable weather with only 4 fully closed days down at the beach. Another issue that we faced was patrons sneaking down to the bluff so to help staff and alleviate that pressure, we added a cashier at the halfway house for most of the summer. On the flip side for the boat expenses, this is in line with the minimum wage increase, about a $5,000. Looking at some past demographics, they are in line with last year with about 50% of pass holders being residents and 18% being non-residents. Northbrook residents make up the rest of that. And then 67% of our passes were for ages 0 to 5, so really targeting those families coming down to the beach. Over the last 3 years, pass sales have been consistent. That COVID year was where we were doing passes only, so we're around 6,000 passes. We're selling annual. For daily admission, sorry, this chart looks all funky. We continue to see residents purchase daily admissions. It looks like they enjoy the flexibility of being able to just pop down on a day and not commit to the full season. And then looking at our average pass visits, it's about 3.5 visits per pass. So they're really getting that break even of 3 visits and making sure, they're getting the use of the pass. Something to highlight again, we had a 30% increase from last year in the annual attendance. And then another thing to highlight is 53% of those visits are made up of residents. And then the only thing I really want to highlight on average visits by day is for this year, our Saturday and Sunday numbers were around 400 visitors every weekend compared to last year. It was 268 and 312. So we really saw that increase. The weather was great and people really came out and used their passes. Beach facility rental revenue is in line over the last 4 years. It really fluctuates. Same with our paddleboard rentals and kayaks. This tends to ebb and flow based on wind direction, conditions, and everything like that. Our camps also use them all the time when they're down there. So if they're available, we'll take them out. Storage spaces. So we have remained the same in the range of total boats over the years, but have seen an increase in the SUP and kayaks at the beach with a decrease in catamarans. With our growing wait list, we operate it as a first come, first served basis. So if a catamaran gives up their spot, we go to the first person on the wait list, whether it be a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard. Another issue we face is space. We don't have enough lockers. We're reaching out right now to help fill spots of people who are leaving. We might not have a locker, and so we're running into that issue as well as shoreline space. On the days we have really strong northeast winds or high waves, my staff are out there pulling up boats so they don't get damaged by the rocks that are coming in and everything like that. So we're doing our best to keep everything safe down there. Boat storage revenue is in line with what we budgeted. And then another change that we made this year was we decreased the discount on the second and third boats. So people are tending to not add more as they're down there. For beach closures, they are in line with the previous year. We saw an increase in high bacteria days due to the amount of rain this summer, causing rain runoff in the lake compared to last summer when we had a drought. So kind of changes every year. You never know what's going on down there with the weather. We keep ourselves busy with a lot of beach programming. So we have our sailing and aquatics camp, sailing classes for adult, youth, and families, fitness classes in the morning, as well as special events. For sailing and aquatics, we've seen a slight decrease in enrollment. A lot of older campers have aged out, and we're seeing that younger kids are signing up. Parents for the age group tend to prefer the full daycare that Sunphone or Camp Adventure offer. So we're about at 95% capacity for each week compared to being full at 100%. This summer, something we're doing to change it is the last week's going to be beach focused to help introduce kids to the beach and see how everything operates down there. For sailing classes, they are all offered on Sundays. We have very limited days where we can, offer these classes with camps using it and all of that. So we have puddle jumpers for the little ones, family sailing, tri-sailing, and adult sailing. We also have limited number of participants based on quality instructors as well as the equipment we have. For special events this year, We added a pass holder event for Summer Splash to kick off the summer to get everyone down there and get excited about their season passes. Another successful year of the beach camp out. And then we rounded out the summer with a cardboard regatta and the trellis table. Beach Safe this year was a little different. I thought of the idea. We had Waukegan Park District coming down to spend a day with us. So we actually ended up sending our Sailing Aquatics camp to their park district to see their aquatic facility. So it was kind of an exchange of the day. They came down one day, we went up there the next day. It was really awesome and everyone had a great time.
So I'm just going to look over a little bit of our overall financials of both facilities. So first and foremost, the beach house financials. As Shannon alluded to, our expenses are up on the staff wages side. So that's really that significant increase, just over $30,000. Luckily, we had really strong ups on past sales and daily admission to kind of counteract that area. The boathouse financials, similarly to what Shannon had alluded to, our revenue is up, partially to the decrease on that second storage spot and third storage spots. Our expenses are up, in part due to that wage increase, but also seeing, impacts on supplies and equipment, having to replace some of the racks, due to the water main work. So some of that, additional expenses did go up due to those couple of items. And then looking at the overall financials, if you include those beach programs that aren't reflected in our corporate accounts for the beach and boating facilities, you can see that our total financials and our excess of revenue over expenditures is still staying positive once you factor in those beach programs. And then the one part, as you may have seen, we have a 10-year data chart with a lot of different information. What I really wanted to pull out and focus on was looking at that revenue per visit. So as you can see, our total visit revenue, so that's looking at daily admissions and passes, not factoring in necessarily boat rentals or kayaks, chairs, facility rentals, only those visit rentals. We're still seeing a really strong revenue per visit of $13 this year. It is obviously trending down, but as you compare back to previous years, it's still a pretty significant number.
So survey results. This year we had we've seen an increase in participation in the pass holder survey with about 362 people responding to the survey. In years prior, we had 166 and 149. So for the overall satisfaction, about 78% of beachgoers were satisfied with the beach season, which I take it, we did it. With the value of the beach pass, about 90% of pass holders thought the value of the pass was good or better. And then some key highlights in beach staff rating that I'm quite proud of is we had double the amount of people participate in the survey, and 51% said the friendliness of staff was excellent. So changing the culture down there, making it a fun place to be, as well as implementing safety measures was 49% excellent, really highlighting those in services and those trainings and making sure the staff are all up to standards. And then the only thing I really want to talk about is beach amenities, is the beach cart. 58% excellent. Everyone loves it. It's a great asset to the community. And over to Bobby.
You may remember this year we added in the Explore Illinois Pass, which is the museum pass, which was an effort to try to get more people who might have financial barriers to access the beach. So we rolled this out through the Secretary of State program. Basically, if you have a library card, you can check out a one-day pass to the beach for your family of up to 6 people. So this is a breakdown of where those people came from. You can even see 6% from Glencoe. We had about 1,000 people utilize it, almost just under 200 families check it out. It was actually great to meet some of those families down at the beach this summer to check in. We thought it was an extremely successful program. We'd love to continue to offer it next year, see if we can tweak it a couple of ways. But we were very proud of that, to give people the opportunity to access the beach 7 days a week, in our normal hours. So that was a huge hit, and we're looking to continue that for next year.
So looking at the Northbrook resident, the Northbrook agreement, Glencoe residents with this agreement get the resident rates at Northbrook's pools as well as their aquatic programs and at the Northbrook Dog Park. At the dog park, they had about 18 pass sales. For Northbrook residents, they get our resident rate at the Glencoe beach. Some past data just to highlight, at the beach, we had about 1,800 Northbrook resident visits. And then at the Northbrook pools, about 757 Glencoe resident visits. So people are utilizing this. Some future considerations, we want to continue to create transparency with the boater waitlist in line with the strategic plan. So brainstorming ways of how we can do that. Watching staffing challenges due to school calendars, and they're always changing, and high school students are going back sooner than the grade school students. Explore more pass holder incentives and appreciation events, and then continue to consider the fiscal impacts of high staff retention rates and wage scale increases and adjust the budgets accordingly. That's it.
Great job.
Good job, Shannon. Happy to answer any questions the board may have.
I personally would like to thank Shannon. It was her first year down at the beach. First year's always hardest, and I would have thought she was there for 5 years, the way the staff responded to her and the operation. So kudos to you for doing an excellent job down there, and it's gonna get easier every year, so look forward. Well, so thank you for a wonderful, safe summer. I always equate the beach as got through another safe summer, so thank you. Appreciate that. And same with Adam, providing that guidance, and Bobby for Shannon's first year, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Go for it. Can you turn on your microphone though?
Okay, why did I think that we didn't have in 20? I know we took away day passes during COVID era. What, did those really come back in 2021? I thought those came back later. I thought we didn't have them for a couple years, the day passes. It's on page something 30.
We only
if I-
did pass holders only for 1 year, correct?
Was it
Yeah.
only 1 year? Okay.
Yep.
And I know we're not seeing the same revenue from pass holders. I wanted to understand what the feedback is from staff. Do we feel like this model is working for us? I know I've had a lot of thoughts on, I don't enjoy telling people they can't use our beach on the weekends. And I see Wilmette has this like almost double or triple price for weekend passes. And I don't want to risk that, but is that a consideration that you're thinking about for next year? Not yet. Okay, I'll put it on not yet. I do think it's an interesting thing what Wilmette does. I frequent the beach quite a bit, and I see our staff, and they are awesome. And it's I'm so happy to see how many of them are friendly and how many are safe. And every year, the fair and poor go down from like 15% to 12% to like 8%. So like you're doing something right. But I see those interactions that we push them into to tell people who come from out of town, hey, there's no option other than a $70 per person season pass. Just please think about the Wilmette thing, because I didn't see that until now.
We put that question in the community survey, correct?
But it's not the community. Sorry, Lisa, I don't.
Right.
Community survey
It's
we
not.
did.
This isn't the community that I'm more concerned about the people who probably don't directly answer our surveys, like the Northbrook or the Gurney or the other people that come in, because they're the ones that are probably predominantly buying the day passes on the demand on the weekends, I presume.
Yeah, I would just say if you actually look at what the resident rate in Northbrook to go to the pool is, the resident rate for some of these aquatic facilities is way more expensive than what we're charging
Yeah.
non-residents to go to our beach. And, operating a beach is equally, if not more expensive than some of these aquatic facilities. So I think our prices are actually extremely fair.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is Wilmette gives you an option. They basically make it, so we do 12 through 24, where Monday, $12, $24 Monday through Friday.
Correct.
Effectively very close to where Wilmette is. What Wilmette seems to do is, according to this, they effectively double that for day passes on weekends. Now, you eat into your season pass then,
Mhm.
but if we price it correctly, I personally don't like to turn away people who want to see one of nature's most beautiful assets. So if someone's willing to pay $25 a non-resident or $30 to do it on the weekend,
Yeah, you also have to bear in mind, Will met I don't know if you've seen the pricing for the parking. If the non-resident parking is extremely expensive too, so the overall price is quite high.
Yeah.
The method we've used is really trying to simplify pricing for people to understand as much as possible, because it is quite challenging to explain multiple different tiers of pricing based on days of the week. So we're trying to keep it as simple as possible and easy for our staff to explain and people to understand.
got it. I understand. I like it. I think you guys have done a tremendous job. And I was telling Jordan when you guys said we're doing over the surveys, oh, this is my favorite part because I like it. And I like the fact that you've got a few years to look at. Although we didn't have good in 2022, you just add them up on top. I like to look at the fair and poor versus the other ones because that tells us where we're weak. And it looks like we don't have many weak spots. So nice job.
Anybody else? Lisa, do we have other business?
We do not. The only thing we have is that we have a champagne toast if we want to do it, but if everybody's too tired, I get that too.
Kinda great, nice.
We can adjourn and then do it.
Can't talk about business, but yes, we can. So, yes.
Okay, so I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is that-
Roll call vote, please. Or is all in?
All in favor?
All in favor.
I
Who's that?
Aye.
Who's that fourth?